Days before my 25th birthday, I knew my sister would manufacture a crisis to make our parents cancel my dinner. It was a pattern. I just refused to see it until the phone rang at 4:47 in the afternoon. I was standing in my kitchen, already wearing the forest green dress I bought to finally celebrate myself. My mother skipped the apology and went straight to the excuse. Courtney needed the family right now. My dinner was canceled 7 hours before the reservation, with a massive deposit already paid. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stared at the linoleum floor. I hung up the phone. I unzipped the green dress and let it drop. I pulled on a pair of jeans, shoved a few shirts into a duffel bag, and grabbed my car keys. I walked out the door, merged onto the highway, and pointed my car toward the Arizona desert. I left my old life behind, and I never looked back. My grandfather, Arthur Bennett, was sitting on the front porch of his rundown 80-acre ranch in Sedona when my headlights swept across the gravel drive. He did not ask why I was there. He did not offer a warm hug or a tearful reunion. He simply stood up, walked into the barn, and handed me a pair of cracked, oversized leather work gloves. The next morning, before the sun even crested the red rock, my education began. For 9 years, I bled into that dirt. We rebuilt the sagging fence lines, rewired the barns, and transformed a dying plot of dry earth into a $4.5 million elite equestrian center and luxury wedding venue. During the first few months, the blisters on my palms ruptured daily. My back ached so deeply I could barely stand straight by dinner. But I kept working. As my skin turned to calluses, my mind cleared. The physical agony burned away, the residual guilt of leaving my family. Occasionally, my phone would buzz with a text from Courtney. She never asked how I was doing. She only sent mocking messages, asking if my little cowgirl phase was over yet, or complaining about how hard her life was in the city. My mother called exactly twice in 9 years, both times to complain about Courtney's fabricated anxiety crises, wrapping up the calls by reminding me that I was the strong one. Sitting in the dust of the arena one afternoon, staring at my wrecked hands, the truth finally snapped into focus. Being called the strong one was never a compliment. It was a cage. It was a calculated, manipulative vocabulary my mother used to justify her own emotional neglect. By labeling me the strong one, she gave herself permission to never show up for me. My competence was not something they admired. It was a resource they exploited so they could pour all their energy into the golden child. They loved what I could endure for them, not who I was. I stopped answering their texts that day. When Arthur passed away quietly in his sleep, the silence on the ranch was deafening, but the peace did not last long. After a decade of complete absence, my mother Valerie and my sister Courtney suddenly descended upon Sedona. They rolled up the gravel drive in a rented luxury SUV, stepping out in immaculate designer morning clothes that looked utterly ridiculous against the backdrop of the working ranch. They did not come to grieve. They came to audit. I watched from the loft of the new $1 million training arena as they prowled the property. Valerie's eyes darted over the manicured grounds, the high-end horse stalls, and the massive cedar wedding pavilion I had built with my own hands. She was not looking at a legacy. She was calculating gross revenue. Later that evening, while wiping down saddles in the tack room, I paused. Voices drifted through the thin wooden walls from the guest house patio. Valerie was on the phone, her voice dripping with syrupy confidence. I listened as she promised someone on the other end of the line that the estate was a gold mine, ready for immediate liquidation. She told them she would use the funds to launch Courtney's new luxury lifestyle brand. Courtney chimed in, laughing, asking what they were going to do about the squatter in the barn. Valerie scoffed, casually stating that they would give me a 30-day notice and maybe let me take one of the older, broken-down horses as a severance package. I stood perfectly still in the shadows. I did not confront them. I let them build their own trap. The arrogance peaked 3 days later. Valerie commandeered the ranch's south porch, demanding we host a memorial lunch. But it was not a memorial. It was a showcase. She invited local vendors, wealthy neighbors, and the man from the phone call, a flashy, out-of-state private equity investor who arrived wearing a suit that cost more than my first truck. Valerie worked the crowd with the polished grace of a grieving matriarch to bypass a formal, lengthy title check. Valerie presented the investor with a 15-year-old notarized will, naming her the sole heir. She smiled her perfect social smile, assuring him the estate was merely pending rapid probate, using the emotional weight of the memorial to pressure him into a handshake deal. She wanted him to sign a contingency letter of intent right there on the porch, locking him in before any real lawyers got involved. She clinked her crystal glass with a silver spoon. The murmurs of the crowd died down. Valerie stepped to the center of the porch, placed a manicured hand on Courtney's shoulder, and announced to the entire town that they had decided to honor Arthur's legacy by selling the ranch to this wonderful investor. She looked down at me, her eyes flashing with cold superiority. She told the crowd not to worry about my future, announcing publicly that I would be given 30 days to vacate the premises, but that the family would generously allow me to keep a horse for my years of hired help. I watched the investor uncap his gold fountain pen. I watched him sign the heavy parchment paper. I let the ink dry. Then I nodded at Trevor Walsh. Trevor was Arthur's estate attorney, a quiet, unassuming bulldog of a man in his late 60s who had been sipping black coffee in the back corner. Trevor set his mug down, unclasped his worn leather briefcase, and stepped into the center of the crowd. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Trevor placed a thick, red stamped document directly on top of the freshly signed letter of intent. He cleared his throat and announced to the silent porch that Arthur Bennett had legally transferred full ownership of the property to me via warranty deed 3 years ago. The transfer was recorded with the county. There was no estate. There was nothing to split. And there was absolutely nothing to sell. The investor froze. His eyes darted from the red county seal to Valerie. The fake, benevolent warmth sliding off Valerie's face was the most beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. Her social mask completely shattered, leaving behind a raw, panicked, open-mouthed shock. The investor snatched the deed, scanning the legal jargon. His face flushed a deep, violent crimson. He realized instantly that he had been played in front of half the town. He grabbed the letter of intent he had just signed and ripped it precisely in half, throwing the pieces onto the wooden deck. He pointed a shaking finger at Valerie, his voice echoing across the silent ranch. He told her she was a fraud, that his legal team would be billing her directly for his wasted time and travel expenses, and that if she ever contacted his firm again, he would have her arrested for attempted fraud. He turned on his heel and stormed off the property. his tires kicking up dust as he sped away. Valerie stood completely isolated in the center of the porch. The wealthy neighbors she had tried to impress were staring at her with open disgust. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I looked my mother dead in the eye. I told her she had spent 30 years praising me for being strong just so she never had to be a mother to me. But Arthur saw the truth. I told her she was trespassing on my $4.5 million estate and that she had exactly 2 minutes to get off my land before I called the sheriff. They scrambled toward their rental car in total humiliating silence. But the golden child could not handle the loss. 2 nights later, my phone lit up with a text message from Courtney. The entitlement bled through the screen. She demanded a $1 million severance payment for her pain and suffering. If I did not wire the money by the end of the week, she swore she would drive back and burn my little business to the ground. She assumed I would cower. She assumed I was still the obedient sister who absorbed her tantrums. She also assumed the ranch's security consisted of the same rusty padlocks from 10 years ago. Courtney parked her car a mile down the Darke County road. She hiked through the brush and spent an hour painfully cutting through an old section of barbed wire cattle fence with heavy bolt cutters. She crept onto the property with a red plastic gas can swinging from her hand. But the moment her designer boots hit the dirt inside my property line, she tripped the commercial-grade seismic sensors buried beneath the soil. Silent alarms pinged the private armed night security contractors I had hired for the week. Before Courtney even reached the first barn, blinding white floodlights snapped on. Pinning her in the dirt, the security team detained her immediately, confiscating the gas can and the bolt cutters while the high-definition night vision cameras recorded every single second. When the local sheriff deputies arrived, I handed them the camera footage, but I also handed them printed copies of Courtney's text messages. Because Courtney lived in California and had used a cellular network to send a threat for financial gain across state lines. The local property crime was no longer just an attempted arson. She had triggered federal wire fraud and extortion statutes. The deputies transferred custody. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Valerie received the phone call she had spent her entire life trying to avoid. Her fragile, precious golden child was sitting in a federal holding cell, facing serious prison time, and no amount of crying or manipulation was going to buy her way out of an FBI indictment. I stood at the end of my gravel drive, watching the taillights of the police cruisers disappear into the desert night. I reached out, grabbed the heavy iron gate, and slid the deadbolt home. The justice was absolute and permanent. 6 months later, I sat in the back of a sterile federal courtroom. The judge did not care about Courtney's manufactured anxiety. He sentenced her to 6 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole only after 4 years of hard time. The court also ordered restitution of $142,000 for the legal fees and the damages to the perimeter fence. The news ripped through our extended family and Valerie's social circles. The women who used to play bridge with my mother stopped returning her calls. The church group she bragged to suddenly found reasons to exclude her from their Sunday luncheons. Valerie didn't just lose her golden child, she lost her reputation, her audience, and her entire social identity. A few months into Courtney's sentence, the hollow echoes of their desperation started to reach me. I received a thick envelope in the mail, stamped by the federal penitentiary. It was a letter from Courtney, filled with smeared ink and desperate guilt trips, begging me to speak to the parole board on her behalf. claiming she only acted out because she felt overshadowed by my success. A week later, a voicemail from Valerie appeared on my phone. Her voice trembled with practiced tears, reminding me that she was still my mother, that family forgives, and that I needed to fix the mess I had created. I sat on the porch of the farmhouse, listening to the voicemail while looking out over the south pastures. I did not feel a spike of anger. I did not feel the crushing weight of guilt that used to control my every decision. I felt nothing but a deep, profound indifference. I tapped the screen and hit delete. I took the unopened letter from Courtney, walked into the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash can. I did not owe them my anger, and I certainly did not owe them my forgiveness. I walked out to the barns. Trevor Walsh was leaning against the fence, laughing with my lead ranch hand. The boarders who kept their horses on my land waved as I walked past. This was my chosen family. These were people who respected the calluses on my hands, who valued my presence, and who never asked me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. The contrast was staggering. The chaos of my past had been replaced by the quiet, steady rhythm of a life built on mutual respect and hard work. If you are listening to this, and you are the one carrying all the weight in your family, I need you to hear me clearly. I need you to understand the exact mechanics of the trap you are caught in. Rule number 1 is shattering the myth of the strong one. Stop accepting their praise for your resilience as a substitute for their love. When a toxic family calls you strong, they are not complimenting your character, they are celebrating their own convenience. Your competence is not a free pass for their neglect. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to need help. And if they disappear the moment you stop carrying their burdens, they were never your family to begin with. You were just their unpaid employee. Rule number 2 is understanding the arrogance of entitlement. Toxic people truly believe they deserve the harvest from the fields they never watered. They will try to intimidate you, gaslight you, and humiliate you into handing over what you built. Do not argue with them. Do not try to explain your pain to people who benefit from it. Let their arrogance grow. Let them build the stage for their own destruction. Their greed will always blind them to the reality of the situation. And that blindness is the exact shovel they will use to dig their own graves. Rule number 3 is the ultimate power of the paper trail. Emotion always loses to a warranty deed. Narcissists thrive in the gray areas of guilt, unwritten promises, and verbal manipulation. You defeat them by operating entirely in the black and white reality of the law. You do not need to scream. You do not need to cry. And you do not need to prove your worth to them the loudest. Most devastating revenge is total silence, backed by legally binding boundaries. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty, respect, and showing up in the dark times makes you family. You are completely allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Even if you share a last name, trust is earned through actions, not owed through genetics. If you are the scapegoat right now, waiting for them to finally see your worth, ask yourself one question. What would happen if you just put the weight down and walked away? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about the day you finally bolted the gate. And remember, the peace you find on the other side of that locked door is worth every single tear it took to get there. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are probably watching this thinking, why on earth did Morgan bleed into that dirt for 9 years without demanding respect? Why did she just stand there in the shadows while her mother plotted to steal a $4.5 million estate right out from under her? It is easy to judge from the outside. But let us talk about why she stayed quiet for so long. In psychology, there is a concept called intermittent reinforcement. I call it the slot machine effect. When you grow up as the scapegoat, toxic parents do not abuse you 100% of the time. They occasionally drop crumbs of hope, a rare compliment, a sudden reliance on your skills, or calling you the strong one. You keep pulling the lever, hoping for a jackpot of genuine love and validation. But you only ever get just enough change to keep you playing the game. Morgan was not stupid or weak. She was conditioned to survive on crumbs. It takes time to realize the casino is completely rigged against you. But when that illusion finally shattered, Morgan executed a masterclass in financial and legal self-defense. Let us break down her street smart strategy. First, the silent audit. When her mother brought that investor onto the porch, Morgan did not throw a tantrum or interrupt the presentation. Scammers hate details, and they thrive on emotional chaos. By staying perfectly quiet, Morgan let her mother commit to the fraud in front of wealthy witnesses. She audited the enemy's plan without ever revealing her own hand. Second, the ironclad buyout. Grandpa Arthur knew the family was toxic, but Morgan and Trevor, the attorney, made sure the paperwork was bulletproof. A county recorded warranty deed filed 3 years prior is a legal nuclear bomb. It bypassed probate courts, bypassed family opinions, and legally severed her mother's claim instantly. That single piece of paper was Morgan's ultimate investment in her absolute freedom. Finally, building the case. When Courtney demanded $1 million and threatened to burn the business down, Morgan did not engage in a text message war. She let the commercial security cameras and the seismic sensors do the heavy lifting. By handing over those extortion texts along with the video evidence, Morgan escalated a local property crime into a federal wire fraud investigation. She built an undeniable case that completely neutralized her mother's money and social influence. 1 year after the trial, I hosted the first autumn wedding at the ranch under my name alone. The sun was setting behind the Sedona rocks, turning the sky copper and rose gold. White chairs lined the grass. Horses moved quietly behind the fence. The cedar pavilion glowed with string lights. And for once, the sound of laughter did not make my body tense. It did not feel like a trap. It felt like life. I stood near the barn doors in a simple cream blouse. My hands still rough. My nails still short. My boots covered in dust. A bride's father walked past me, wiping tears from his face. He stopped, looked around at the lights, the flowers, the horses, and said, "Your grandfather would be proud of what you built here." For a second, I could not answer, because Arthur had not saved me with soft words. He had saved me by giving me work, land, silence, and trust. He never called me strong as an excuse to abandon me. He taught me that strength was not how much pain I could carry. Strength was knowing when to put the weight down. After the wedding ended, I walked alone to the far fence line, where the desert opened wide and quiet. I remembered the green dress I never wore on my 25th birthday. I remembered standing in my kitchen, waiting for a family that had already chosen Courtney before the phone even rang. Back then, I thought leaving meant I had lost everything. But I had not lost my family that night. I had escaped my assignment. I was no longer the dependable daughter, the unpaid fixer, the emotional shock absorber The woman expected to smile while everyone else ate from the life she built. I was simply Morgan, owner of Bennett Ranch, builder of fences, keeper of horses, protector of my own peace. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Unknown number. I looked at the screen, then at the locked iron gate, glowing silver under the moonlight. I did not answer. I did not wonder whether it was Valerie. I did not imagine Courtney crying into a prison phone. I did not feel cruel. I felt free. I deleted the call and walked back toward the warm lights of the pavilion. Behind me, the desert stayed still. Ahead of me, my chosen family was waiting with leftover cake, muddy boots, tired smiles, and no hidden price tag attached to their love. And that was the real inheritance Arthur left me. Not the land, not the money. The permission to finally belong to myself. Here is the verdict. You cannot outlove a toxic family, but you can absolutely outsmart them. Your worth is not measured by how much abuse you can endure. And your peace of mind is worth defending with every legal tool at your disposal. If you are dealing with people who view your boundaries as a negotiation, stop arguing and start documenting. Have you ever had to pull the plug on a rigged relationship and walk away with your receipts? Drop your experience in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more strategies on protecting your peace, your sanity, and your assets. Stay smart, and I will see you in the next one.